Welcome back to the platform. This is episode 5, and we're doing something a little different today. It's not a virtual chat. I am here at Louf, which is a Palestinian-owned business. It's a restaurant, and I have with me the founder and also co-founder. So I have Nicole and I have Fadi as well.
Hi, nice seeing you here.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thanks for having me here. So we'll get right into it. Today's topic is we're going to talk about the Palestinian food, the business, and how this all plays a role when we're talking about everything that comes with the discussion of Palestine. So whether it be colonialism, whether it be even the topic about food playing a role in the movement when it comes to resistance and liberation. So let's first talk about Louf. It's here in Toronto. Tell us a little bit about how the name came about, where it started.
Part of what we suffer from is being denied foraging. And Louf is one of the many herbs that we're still allowed to forage. The fact that there's this imposed colonial disconnect from the land makes it rarer, but it's also the only herb, that actually has in its original Latin name Palestine. And so it's Arum Palestinum. And we thought it was symbolic to have that as our branding.
Fadi's also the chef here. Tell us a little bit about the food that you use. Is it from Canada or are you importing it from Palestine?
So wherever I cook, I think we have a responsibility towards the local farmers. In Toronto, everything that's fresh is sourced in Ontario. From Palestine, we get olive oil, we get maftool, we get frika, we get our hand soap, and we get our za'atar from Palestine. We get our black tania and our regular tania from Palestine, but everything fresh is sourced locally. We source sustainable, we source preferably small farming, because that is what we do in Palestine. When you cook in Palestine, you go to the souk and you buy your produce from the local farmers. I don't see where it doesn't make sense for me to be importing meat or vegetables from the Middle East or sometimes people are importing meat from Australia. Like, it doesn't make sense that here you have a thriving farming industry made up of fantastic people. We're lucky with the cheese producers we work with the herb growers. They're really inscribed within the landscape and the terroir of Ontario. I think that's our duty also.
And Nicole, what made you want to be part of this and start this business here in Toronto?
That's a very good question. I think my family is Palestinian. I have Palestinian children, and they know their heritage on my side of the family. What they have as a challenge is trying to preserve that identity of theirs that is Palestinian. And we, like most diaspora families, we have a lot of connection to Tita, who sends recipes, and we eat Palestinian at home. But I think that in the grander scale, Palestinian food shouldn't just be represented in your home. I think being able to share that beautiful cuisine with the rest of the city, especially in these times, I think that seeing the beauty of Palestine and seeing the beauty of the cuisine is really important. And it's a nice segue to be able to have those discussions with others about what Palestine really is. So it's just the interest to counter a lot of the narratives that are out there and to say it's a beautiful place, it has beautiful cuisine, it's rooted in the land, and we should be celebrating it.
And you say Palestinian teta making food. I mean, I would ask for the recipes, but I don't need to because I can just come here to Louf. Sure. But speaking of food, I guess that brings me to my next point, which is the conversation of food, part of the resistance. A lot of people now, there's maybe confusion and they don't understand. They hear hummus. There's some Israeli maybe restaurants who are claiming that some of this food belongs to them. And that's part of, I think, the discussion. So how would you like to address this? Because I don't want to center myself. I'm not Palestinian, you are. So I'm going to hand the torch over to you.
I think we need to divide that question into different things. Part of the resistance? No. Palestinians want to live like everybody else. We're tired of hearing things like resilience and sumud and, oh, you're a hero because you're picking up your olives. A Palestinian farmer who picks up their olives should not be subjected to being shot, like last season. People were killed picking their olives. And this thing which, and Nicole mentioned the diaspora, and I think there's a bit of a confusion in the discussion and the points of view from people who are the diaspora or people who are living on the ground. And for me, everybody's Palestinian. There's no more Palestinian, less Palestinian based on where you were born, what your life journey is. But I do think people have to realize that there is a very dangerous thing happening right now, which is the fetishization of Palestinians. We are not the little town of Gaulois from Asterix and Obelix resisting the Romans. We just want to live like everybody else. So that bit of foodist resistance, I'm very cautious with it. Yes, we need to support Palestinian farmers. Yes, we need to support every Palestinian artisan that is staying on the ground, that is still there, that's still in Gaza, that's still in West Bank, that's still in 48, that's still in Jerusalem. We shouldn't see Palestine as 48 in Jerusalem and Gaza. It's Palestine. And anybody who's on the ground, whether they're running a supermarket or they're farming the land, for me is somebody who is preserving that presence that has been subject to a bit more than 100 years of trials of erasure. Now, you touched on appropriation. And appropriation is a horrible thing. When Nicole was saying we have a beautiful cuisine, seeing it stolen and seeing actually people that are not part of this narrative taking it for granted, that it's okay that an Israeli chef steals hummus and steals falafel and steals makluba and steals olive oil and steals sumac. I have no problem that an Israeli chef would cook Palestinian food.
That's an interesting point.
As long as they say it's Palestinian. Just like Nicole and I could set up tomorrow another restaurant and cook French food.
Yes.
Or Japanese food.
Yeah. But giving credit where it's due, essentially, is what you're...
But this is even the base of what's happening in food today. If you buy a camembert from France, it's made in Normandy. It's not made in Marseille. The inscription of the transmission, the terroir, the knowledge of a product. Today, when you go to a farmer's market here in Toronto, you're asking the producer, where are you planting your vegetables?
Yes.
Where are you making your cheese? Where are you making your wine? Why, when it comes to Palestine, it's okay not to do that? When I see Israeli chefs being celebrated for what they're offering, that is Palestinian, under disguise, and the words that they use, which I think are dangerous, Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, Levantine, are so much in that colonial view of whatever is native is great, is cool, we appropriate it, we make it part of our own story. And that relation is quite dangerous because it's erasing my grandmother's gesture of making bread. It's not just erasing the bread, it's erasing the tradition of making food. The big danger with this is if we allow the Israelis to go on with this, and if we go on celebrating this, what's going to be left from Palestinian food? Today, you go into a supermarket here to buy hummus off the shelf. It says Israeli hummus. What is Israeli hummus? Hummus is way older. You and I can have an argument on who owns hummus. Because is it the Palestinians? Is it the Egyptians? When was the first time a chickpea was ground in that region? Yes.
It's okay. That's our inner beef. That's something we can talk about,
Exactly.
As it's our people, our community, but I guess from the outside, right?
And it also leads to another layer of things, which the Israelis have recently been using as an argument, that there are some Israelis that come from Arab countries. In reality, there are Arabs from specific Arab countries that were of Jewish faith in Egypt, in Palestine, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Syria. Does it make the food Israeli once they were either they moved or they were thrown out and ended up in the newly created state of Israel on our land? Does it make it Israeli? No, it doesn't. The best example is pizza. I think the biggest consumers of pizza in the world are the Americans, but pizza is not American. Pizza will remain Italian. So why with us it's an exception?
What made you want to be a chef?
Cooking in my grandmother's kitchen as a kid, and then in my mother's kitchen, I realized I first love cooking, but I also like very much hospitality. I was lucky to have grandparents that entertained a lot. So the house would go into a frenzy 3 times a week where they were setting up their dining rooms, they were cooking, things were happening. But also my grandmother had a very strong link to farmers because she had set up the Arab Women's Union in Bethlehem with a group of her friends. And my grandfather was a doctor who, when he was managing a hospital in Bethlehem, and funnily enough, a few days ago, we went to Mississauga to a falafel place. And the gentleman's originally from Hebron. And when he said where he was born, I laughed and I was like, so the person who delivered you coming to life was my grandfather. So, when you're a doctor in a small place like Bethlehem, you know everybody. And so I remember every Sunday afternoon, we would drive to visit friends of theirs in the villages around Bethlehem. And every time, you know how hospitality is in the Arab world, if the person we were visiting makes honey, we'd go home with a jar of honey. If the person has batir aubergines, we'd go home with aubergines. That link made me really want this. Years later, I trained in France and came back to Palestine, worked for a tiny bit, and then the second intifada happened, so the hotel I was working in closed down. I left the industry totally for a good of 15 years to do other things. Then I went back to cooking, partially because I'm Palestinian, because I was tired of seeing our food not represented. Historically, in Palestine, what you will eat on the street is great street food, falafel, shawarma, spleen sandwiches, all of that, hummus. And then restaurants would either serve mezzas and grilled meats, which is not only Palestinian, it's shared in the region, or badly made, no, I'm being nasty, some of it well made, other cuisines. But we never served our real cuisine because it was home. As Nicole was saying, it's very much food you eat at home. So when I started Fauda in Bethlehem in 2015, the idea was, how do I represent to people who are visiting the country our cuisine differently? And that's where the journey started.
And Nicole, speaking of, Fadi just mentioned a point of that hospitality. When I walked in here, it feels like home. I didn't even eat yet, so that says a lot. Just the decor, everything. And if you can tell us a little bit about what makes this restaurant, not just by the name and not just by where it's located and who's running it, but what is it from the inside that makes it Palestinian, besides just the food?
Well, I think first off, it's that sense that you had when you came in the building. You feel as though you're in someone's place. It's very warm. It's very welcoming. And I think across the board, when you go into any Arab home, it's like you have that sense like you're anticipating getting fed, getting treated very kindly. And, we wanted to make sure that right from the first walk-in, that everyone felt welcome. And I think, we've taken a lot of time to think about the different aspects of the interior. From occasionally we try to have some of the flowers that are in bloom in Palestine at the same time. Our artwork, we've worked with a couple of artists from Gaza, and they've loaned us their works. So we have Arij Code, who is based out of the UK. We have Mohammed Mosalem, who is actually locally based. He was in here yesterday having a chat with us and brought more gifts, actually.
Speaking of hospitality, yeah. And the one behind you too, right? From my understanding, that one's also by a Gazan artist. Is that correct?
That's Dr. Mosalem. So he was a professor at Gaza University in art philosophy. So we felt we should do something that is representative of the time that we're in. We wanted to work with Gazan artists as the primary decor here first. And we'll be rotating with other artists so that we can celebrate a lot of the Palestinian artists that are in and around Toronto as well. The plates are also from Palestine. We have all of our crockery is from Noor Manawi, who's a third-generation ceramist. So we have a light installation right above our bar. It's a beautiful art piece. It's like a vintage piece, but there's also small rocks in front of the lights, and that's, there's there's little details like that that remind us that this isn't just a restaurant. We want to be able to, of course, celebrate Palestine through Fadi's Chef Fadi's food, but also we want people to be able to look around the building and appreciate the different points that we've tried to integrate that are part of Palestine as well as here.
I guess it's fair to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, a taste of Palestine. So whether it be edible or actually just taking it all in, like you feel like maybe you're in Palestine a little bit because you see so much of that incorporated.
Every detail was picked with a link to Palestine somehow. When we painted the bar downstairs, we were both trying to find a color that suited, and the designers were suggesting a few things, and then I snapped a picture of an iron door in Bethlehem, and they have a common color of blue, sent it to Nicole, and then Nicole was like, wait, I'll find something. And she found the tone of the blue that is very reminiscent of that blue that's used on all the metal doors in the old city of Bethlehem. So every little detail tells a bit of a story of Palestine. From the art, from the flowers, from Nicole planted a sumac tree at the entrance of the restaurant.
Ooh.
Like, it's all those details that do make a difference.
Yes. And how has the response been like from the public? I mean, obviously, I don't think you guys are going to be like, it's been bad, but I mean, I don't think anyone would say that. I mean, like I said, it's a very welcoming place, but I know I've heard already that the food here is amazing. But besides just the food, just even the response in general, like, have people come who don't even know anything about maybe Palestine and they've learned something here? Have you gotten a response like that?
We've had a lot of people that don't know anything about Palestine. They come in, dine, and I see their reaction from the moment they're given the drinks menu. They're like, wait, there's Palestinian wines? And so we tell them the story of the oldest grapes planted in the world were planted in Jericho, 9,500 years before Christ. And it's actually an Egyptian traveler under the pharaohs who wrote the first text where he says that in the land of Canaan, there's an abundance of grapes and wine. So starting from that to going down to our alcoholic and non-alcoholic cocktails, where they're all based on a flavor from Palestine, a taste of Palestine, either a spice, either a product. Yesterday we were testing drinks for Ramadan, and Nicole and her family kept talking about the memory of Amardin, which is the apricot.
Oh, yes.
And our sommelier came up with a combination that actually reminds us of that to the food. But what I expect, and what I think Nicole and I, when we were thinking of this even, we're not here to educate people. We're here to give people a great experience. With food, with drink, with cleanliness, with hospitality, and hopefully people go out with questions. So the team's been trained where we constantly run training programs about where are we sourcing our olive oil? Why are we sourcing this or that olive oil? We use Nabulsi cheese that's made by a Palestinian family in Mississauga. So they're using Canadian milk because that's also important. We're not in a vacuum.
Yeah, you're supporting local and also abroad.
Yes, and then we use that to tell a story, but hoping that people walk out and ask themselves the questions of, but wait, this is not what we hear about Palestinians. And then it forces yesterday I had a very emotional call with somebody who was a guest here a few weeks ago, and she said something which really touched me. She said, I cried having dinner at Louf, but I was also extremely happy and I enjoyed it. Because I think that's important. We're tired of seeing the trade of misery. I don't want people to come and have dinner here because they feel bad about the Palestinians. I want them to come and have dinner here because it's a great restaurant, because we're doing everything right, I hope. And we try. Every day we get it better, but that's why I want people to come and have dinner here. Yes, it's Palestinian. Yes, we're celebrating Palestine. We're celebrating the beauty of Palestine that Nicole was describing in our hospitality, in our food. But it's not, but the poor Palestinians,
It's not a pity party. You want
it's
people
not
to
a pity
actually
party.
come because of the
Exactly.
quality, the
Exactly.
experience.
Exactly.
And so on that note, I guess this question will start with Nicole and we'll wrap it up soon. Nicole, how do you feel just having this business, seeing the response from the public?
I think for me as a mom, for me as someone who is raising a family here in Toronto, who is aware of some of the politics that are going on, not just here but also in Palestine. I think that it's very heartwarming to know that there are others who, despite what we see as the narrative in the media, what's happening on the ground is that there's a lot of support for Palestine. And I think that people who aren't outwardly active, they don't go to protests, they don't go to anything that's outward facing, they will come to the restaurant. So they want to support in the ways that are natural to them. And I think, just like Fadi said, when this person was in the restaurant before, she came in and had an emotional experience, because I think when people come into the restaurant and they see that Palestine is being celebrated in this way with Chef Fadi's cuisine and all the little touches that we have here, I think just the act of the acknowledgement of the beauty is very powerful. And so that's all I ever wanted, is to see Palestine represented here in my city in a beautiful way. So I'm really overjoyed that we've had this reception.
And congratulations, it is very well done.
It's a strange feeling. So I think, as Nicole said, the real reason of Louf being here is sharing that beauty, sharing the plates, the art, the story. And I think with this, it's very heartwarming, definitely. It's also very interesting that we're challenging a lot of preconceptions from all sides. People from the Palestinian diaspora in Toronto come in and they bring in with them their own journeys. And their journeys are very varied. So listening to guests, talking to guests, and hearing things like, oh, but that's not how we do this dish. I'm like, okay, it's my interpretation of this dish. It's a twist. But I want to hear how you do it. Because the nature of the people in the diaspora is people came from all over Palestine. Some of them were thrown out in 48 by the Israelis and then 67. Some of them actually emigrated before. And we were at the Nablus Creamery in Mississauga, the person, Anan, who does our cheese and our ice creams. And we left, a gentleman walked in, and then the artisan, Anan, came up and he's like, come down, come down. This gentleman wanted to speak to me because his family was originally from Bethlehem, but they had emigrated here way before 48. And then he emigrated 60 years ago here. So those stories enrich even the way we cook here, because we're listening to all those experiences. With people that are not familiar with Palestinian cuisine, it's a fantastic journey because we guide them through the flavors, the regions. We have dishes that are inspired from the north of Palestine. Some are inspired from Gaza. Some are inspired from Jerusalem. Just telling that story is very satisfying to see how people all of a sudden switch from discovery to actually embracing it. Because at the end, food allows us to embrace that experience altogether.
And speaking of that experience, we mentioned Teta earlier. So for anyone who's not an Arabic speaker, Teta's grandmother. Is there anything, because I mean, should we give credit to Teta here? I know that you're a professional chef, but is there something sentimental too? Like, do you see any bit of the stuff that you got from Teta or mom in your cuisine now?
So, part of what I have in the menu are dishes inspired by our conversation.
Okay.
When Nicole first reached out, before saying anything about the idea of a restaurant here, she asked me for the recipe of a helba dessert, a fenugreek dessert. Yes. It's on the menu now. She told me a story about her memory of foraging mushrooms. My mother cooks fantastic mushrooms. I combined those two ideas with Canadian sourced mushrooms, and we have a mushroom salad that's half pickled mushrooms, half sauteed mushrooms, so warm and cold salad with coriander, which my mother uses in mushrooms. So all those inspirations come from there. Teta, my biggest regret is my grandmother never got to see me go back to becoming a chef. She was still alive when I studied cooking, but then I did other things. And actually, that is always in my head when I'm in the kitchen because she used to tell me off when I made mistakes. And that's my reminder of quality. Like I imagine, if I'm frying something and I spill over on the,
Clean.
I clean it because in my head, Teta would tell me off.
Yeah.
But everything I cook is inspired by what my grandmother gave me, what my grandparents in general gave me, and what my mother still gives. Like we have a lentil soup on the menu. I have a big story with my mother's lentil soup because for 40 years she's been giving me different recipes every day. I ask her, and I still do. And when I got to Toronto last week, I called her and I was like, "So the lentil soup's really good." She's like, "Oh, by the way, I just decided to add some carrots into mine." And I was like, "Wow, where did the carrots come out from?"
Yeah.
So, food is alive.
Yeah.
Food is also our way to pay homage to the people in our stories, in our families, who are no more here. And I think that's important to share with the guests also. When you cook because of your life journey, because of people who have influenced you in your life journey. You cook because Palestine influenced. Like when I use olive oil, it's not innocent. We got our olive oil from Jenin, and I remember the first delivery of olive oil. The team was so excited. The head chef did not notice that the truck was still closed, and like I have a picture of him on the back of the truck, and it's like, but the back's not open. And then we got the olive oil out, and Nicole grabbed a cutter, opened the one of the boxes, and we all drank that olive oil. So that common joy of celebrating Palestinian products, Palestinian inspired dishes, it comes from our experiences. On our team, we have people from 20 different origins. They bring also their touch. My father was born in India. I listened to some of our colleagues that are from the Southeast Asian continent but how do you cook this? And very often we find similarities.
It's so beautiful to see, and congratulations to the both of you
Thank
on
you.
this beautiful restaurant. Because food also brings people together. It's also, I know for me, and maybe some other people can relate, which is a privilege too, but at the dinner table at home, you sit with your family and you talk, and that's part of it too. It allows people to sit and talk, and it could be light conversations, it can be heavy conversations, and then it's an ode to your roots and also an ode to your grandmother. And so thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Sharing your stories, yeah. Well, so that concludes this episode of The Platform. Thank you again for joining, and make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn that notification bell just to know when the next episode is on. Thanks.